Hi, we're going to be starting a new topic, and that is Renaissance poetry. I hope this isn't too much of a whiplash from Murder on the Orient Express, but here we are. Passionate Shepherd to His Love is the first one we're going to be looking at because it's February. So let's look at some poems that have to do with love, and Renaissance poetry is going to be one of those. So this is the first one we're going to be looking at. Before we start looking at into the poem, we should look a little bit at the author and talk a little bit about the author, Christopher Marlowe, because he's quite the character. Christopher Marlowe is born at the same time as Shakespeare, and this comes into play because we're going to talk a little bit about people's thoughts about Christopher Marlowe versus Shakespeare. Their christening dates are very similar; they're just off by a few months, but the day and the year are the same, and so people have all sorts of speculation about that. Lots of people think that Marlowe and Shakespeare, they were both British playwrights. And so there's a lot of speculation about maybe this person stole work from the other person or vice versa. But Marlowe also is some of the information about Marlowe people like to think about is that maybe he was a spy as well. So it's not just politics where people have conspiracy theories, but literature enthusiasts and English teachers like to also have conspiracy theories. And Marlowe's life is fraught with them. And so one of those is whether or not he was a spy. And this comes into play because he goes to go get his master's degree, and the board of the school that he goes to graduate from has some concerns that he might be Catholic. I think later on in his life, there's concerns or that he might actually be an atheist, and so they're not going to give him the master's degree, but all of a sudden they have a letter that is given to them by the government saying, yes, indeed, they will give him the master's degree. Thank you very much, because Marlowe was busy doing work for them. Thank you. And so that's where the speculation of whether or not he was a spy comes about. You could say that he was notorious. He is notorious. So on your class notes, under the words to know, you need to write this word down. I didn't put it on your notes, but this is going to be a vocabulary word that will come up again. Notorious in regards to Christopher Marlowe, widely and unfavorably known. I'm not sure that unfavorably is always in this case, but he's definitely widely known for maybe unfavorable events. Okay, so that might be a better way. So Christopher Marlowe is a very notorious character, very notorious playwright. He does write 7 plays, including his most famous play, Dr. Faustus. And there is a video that you can watch here on Dr. Faustus. And I have that linked out for you so you can get an idea of what that is. I would encourage you to watch that. It gives you some idea of some of the things that were rolling around in Christopher Marlowe's brain, which will make you wonder when you look at this poem, because it's not really in the same vein at all. It's one of the reasons why I often wonder that maybe this poem is kind of a spoof or a joke of the poetry that's being written of that day. Maybe not. Maybe he's just a very shallow person. I'm not sure, but it's possibly that it's a spoof too, if you look at some of his other plays. He is the first to write in blank verse, and this means that he isn't constrained by the confines of poetry. If you maybe remember from Shakespeare that you learned last year, he wrote in iambic pentameter. This particular poem is written in iambic tetrameter, which we'll discuss next week when we look at the response to this, written by Sir Walter Raleigh. They're both written in iambic tetrameter, but we're not going to talk about that this week. And also it has couplets and it has quatrains, which we'll talk about in a few minutes as well. But in his several of his other plays, he wrote in blank verse, which means he wasn't constrained by those confines. You don't have to worry about whether or not things rhyme or whether they have a specific beat. So that's what that is. The other notorious bit that comes in with Christopher Marlowe is that he died very young. He was probably about, I think, 29, if I remember correctly, and his death is a little mysterious. He is convicted of treason. And a couple of days later, he's in a bar with a friend, and they get in a little bit of a tussle, a bar fight, as it were, over who's going to pay the bill, of all things. And he's stabbed in the eye by his friend. And so this leads some more of those conspiracy theories of whether or not he was a spy that had gone rogue, and that there was something out for his death, and all these things. So we don't really know, but it is always kind of fun to speculate on these things as well. So if you want to know a little bit more about him, you can watch this video as well. It gives you a nice round story about Christopher Marlowe, and gives you a little more insight as well than what I've told you. So before we tackle this poem, there's a few words that we should know, that we should look at. And one is that this is a pastoral poem. A pastoral poem means that it is talking about rural life in the country, but it's not just life in the country. It's idealized. It's glossy and beautiful, and it doesn't look at all the nitty gritty, I guess not nitty gritty, but gritty details, the dirt and the bugs and the, whatever else. It's just, everything's beautiful, and it's always serene. And so it's idealized. It's like thinking about Hawaii, right? And saying, oh, Hawaii, it's so gorgeous. And then realizing, again, I'm nothing against Hawaii, but then taking out the fact that it's going to be very, very warm, and you might be overly hot quite a bit, or there's going to be sand in all different kinds of places that you're never going to be able to get rid of completely, right? It's idealized. So this is what we're talking about. This particular poem is a pastoral poem. It's also lyrical, which means that it expresses emotion, and lyrical poetry is often spoken in the first person. So if you just look at the first couple of lines here, just the first line even, come live with me and be my love, you can see that it's written in the first person. And as you move down through the poem, it's expressing quite emotion. The poem is also written in quatrains, and a quatrain is a verse with 4 lines. Think the word quattro, right? In your Spanish class, quatre is Latin for 4. So a verse with 4 lines. So it has the 4 lines, and those 4 lines are written in couplets. So a couplet is a pair of successive rhyming lines, and they usually have the same length. The first one, let's not take the first one because it's a little bit of a sloppy rhyme, at least in our American English. But also, so let's look at lines 3 and 4 in the first quatrain. They end with fields and yields. So you have those rhyming lines. And if you go all the way through, you'll see that there's a couplet and a couplet, 2 couplets for each quatrain. Okay? So when I talk about quatrains and couplets, you'll know what I'm talking about. All right. One of the best things to do when you're learning a new poem is to hear it read aloud. And because I get to talk to you all the time, I have found someone else that can talk to you about, read this poem to you. So go ahead, and I would like for you to listen to this poem being read aloud by an expert, right? But let me just talk a little bit about reading the poem aloud. When you read poetry, you need to pay attention to the marks that are there. So if it is a comma, you pause. If there's not a comma, you don't pause. If there's a semicolon, then it is a little bit of a longer pause, but it's not quite a period. But if there's a period, then it's an end mark. So when you read that, let's take the second quatrain there. And we will sit upon the rocks, seeing the shepherds feed their flocks, by shallow rivers to whose falls melodious birds sing madrigals. So of course there's a pause after rocks and flocks because there's a comma there. But after falls, there's nothing. So that whole section belongs together. If you look at the quatrain, it's actually only one, it's all one sentence. So if you pause after every single line, you might get confused about what the poem is saying. But if you utilize the end marks, then it helps your understanding of poetry become more clear. So, by shallow rivers to whose falls melodious birds sing madrigals. So it's all one section, right? So when you pay attention to those end marks, it will help bring clarity to your understanding of the poem. All right. Let's come back to this. Okay. So if you pull out your poem and you take a look, the first quatrain is the introduction, or we'll say the argument that the passionate shepherd is laying out to his love. This is the argument. This is what he wants. Come live with me and be my love, and we will all the pleasures prove that valleys, groves, hills and fields, woods or steepy mountain yield. Basically, he's saying, if you come and live with me and you be my love, then we will have pleasure throughout life, no matter where we go, or at least throughout this time, right? No matter whether it's the valleys or the hills or the mountains, we will find pleasure no matter where we go. It's going to be a great time if you come with me. All right, that's his argument. Then he's going to lay out in the next several quatrains proofs or evidence of his love and all the things that he's going to provide for her or do for her that are going to be wonderful. And then he has a little bit of a conclusion at the end of that last quatrain as well. It's really the last couplet that's the conclusion. So we're going to take this little by little and take a look and see what it is that he's promising. All right, so let's look at the things that the passionate shepherd promises his love, that he will give them if she comes with him and chooses him. He says, this is the second quatrain, and we will sit upon the rocks, seeing the shepherds feed their flocks by shallow rivers to whose falls melodious birds sing madrigals. All right, so he's saying, he's setting a pretty scene for her, right? We're going to go out to a lovely spot and we'll sit upon the rocks. Have you ever gone out to a field where there's big rocks that have soaked in the sun all day, and you lay there and you just also soak in the sun, soak in the warmth of the rocks, and you're looking out to the field, and you're seeing the shepherds and the flocks of sheep. This is also a shepherd, so he's watching other people work. That's fine. And nearby is a shallow river that is making lovely music as it falls over the rocks. So you hear the sounds of water, but then you also hear the sounds of the birds, melodious birds singing madrigals. Madrigals are a song that is sung with many voices, but usually without some kind of instrument. So we might call it a cappella, but this is a madrigal. Okay, so you're lounging around, watching people work, looking around at the beauty around you, listening to the sounds of water, listening to the sounds of birds. He's pretty much saying it's going to be a vacation, right? We're going to be able to relax and chill and have a nice vacation. And then we have here, he says in the third quatrain, line 9, and I will make thee beds of roses, right? Hopefully these are roses without the thorns, obviously. We use this is a metaphor here that we have, beds of roses. We use this metaphor quite a bit. Life is your life a bed of roses. It's cushy, it's extravagant, right? To use the rose just for the petals to lay on, to lie about on. So you'll make the beds of roses and 1,000 fragrant posies. A posy is a little bunch of flowers. So you'll have wonderful flowers and a soft, cushy bed. And then he also offers her a cap of flowers, maybe something like this, a cap of flowers, and a kirtle. And we don't really use this word as much, a kirtle, but a kirtle is this particular thing that you see up here with the overdress right here. And so you have your underdress here, then you would have this overdress or kirtle. And this is better because it's easily exchanged for something else. It uses less fabric if you get it dirty, or if you get it uh, soiled, then it's not an entire gown that you're having to replace, things like that. So here's a kirtle. But again, we're not pausing at the end of kirtle because there's no end mark. So a cap of flowers and a kirtle embroidered all with leaves of myrtle. Okay, so he's saying that this kirtle is going to have a beautiful embroidery around it, something like this here, this embroidered myrtle leaves. And a myrtle, whenever you see plants in poetry, you have to ask yourself, is there a meaning? Because plants usually have meaning, and this does not is not distinct from that. That is true here. When we look at what myrtle is, it is the herb of love, and so it works perfectly here, doesn't it? Myrtle being the herb of love, and this dress here shows some of the embroidery along the sleeves or the gown. Sometimes it would be along the edges as well. Now, here's the question that I always have with this: is this practical? And who's going to be doing the embroidery? He's a shepherd. He's not going to be paying someone else to do the embroidery. And shepherdesses or other, the wife of the shepherd probably doesn't have time to sit around in the evening and embroider her dress so that she can go out into the field and have it get dirty. So it's a nice thought. And of course, what woman doesn't want to have fancy clothes and beautiful looking clothes? And yet this might not be overly practical for her. The next thing that he promises is also not overly practical. If you look in the fourth quatrain, a gown made of the finest wool, which from our pretty lambs we pull. So he's offering her a beautiful gown. And this one definitely makes me take a pause because he's offering this beautiful woolen gown made from the lamb's wool that they have, right? Because he's a shepherd. And so you imagine them pulling the wool, and this is usually one of the reasons why you're going to have sheep, because you're going to pull the wool and you're going to sell it to someone who's going to make beautiful things from it. So we would need to think back about how that's going to happen in this time period. Who's going to be making this gown? How is this gown going to be made? It's probably going to be the woman who's going to be making this gown, because you take the wool and you're not just going to fashion the dress out of the wool from the lambs. There are steps that need to be made. So you take the wool, and of course you take the nice clean wool, let's put it that way, and you're going to spin it into thread. Okay, so that's going to take some time. You're going to spin it into thread, and then you're going to take that woolen thread and you're going to weave it into if you've got a little bit of money, or this is your job, you might dye some of it so you would have different colors, but then you would weave it into the fabric so that you could then cut it out and make the gown that you have. So as wonderful as this idea is that he's going to give her this wonderful dress, who's going to do the spinning? It's not going to be the shepherd. Who's going to do the weaving? It also will probably not be the shepherd. Who's going to do the sewing? So it's like giving your love a gift and being like, here, I bought you this wool so you can make yourself something. I don't know if that's a great gift or not, but it's a very nice thought. Maybe he's encouraging her that she could have lovely gowns from the wool. They won't have to buy the wool. I'm not sure. But whenever I read that line, I think, oh, okay, well, that's going to be a lot of work. But it'll be available to her. That's very nice. The other thing that he gives her is also not a very practical gift. Now, I meant to go and look and see if in this time period, if shepherdesses were wearing shoes, because I'm not sure, and I'm not sure that they were, to be honest. And they definitely were not wearing the kind that he promises. So this other promise, fair lined slippers for the cold with buckles of the purest gold. Well, that is lovely to be able to have slippers when it's cold outside. And these aren't slippers like your house shoes, okay? These are going to be slippers, maybe something like this. These ones don't have gold buckles, but they do have pearls and other things on them. But you can see that these are not shoes that you're going to be wearing out as you care for sheep in the fields. or even doing housework. So ladies, it's like thinking about wearing your heels just as you clean the bathrooms or go out and do yard work. That's not going to be overly practical. And this is what he has: fair lining slippers for the cold. And these ones without the pearls, they have gold buckles. So it's not overly practical for someone in their particular sphere of life, is it? It's a nice thought, but not overly practical. The next thing he offers her is a belt, right? And this is the type of belt that would have been worn around this time period. You can see this here. This one is made out of silver. What is the one that made out of that he promises her in the fifth quatrain? Line 17, a belt of straw and ivy buds with coral clasps and amber studs. So he takes the straw and the ivy and we weave them together to create a belt. Its clasps are made of amber, which is this particular orange material over here. I'm sorry, coral clasps, which is this particular orangey material over here, red orange material over here, which is just beautiful, semi-precious stones. And amber studs. So then if you can kind of look at this belt here, there's little studs or little bits and pieces of something beautiful, blue and beautiful, that are inset into this belt. And that's what he's talking about, where the amber is going to be, this golden colored amber is going to be in those woven within this straw and ivy material. This is really interesting because it's such a contrast with the natural straw and ivy, and almost a little more perishable, right, than with the coral and the amber. Is a little more imperishable. It's not completely imperishable, but it is. It might be a little extravagant to set something like coral and amber within something as delicate and as perishable as straw and ivy. As it disintegrates, that you'll lose those semi-precious stones. And then he says at the end of that quatrain on lines 19 and 20, and if these pleasures may thee move, come live with me and be my love. If all of these gifts that I choose to offer you move you toward love and move you toward a desire to be with me, then come on, let's go. You come and be my love. And it's like he's offering all of these gifts. And does this change your mind? Do you want to come with me and be my love? He has one more thing to offer. We've offered the vacation kind of lifestyle, some gifts throughout, extravagant gifts throughout, and then this last one he offers: the shepherd's swains shall dance and sing for thy delight each May morning. So he's saying the shepherd's helpers, the herders, the other people that are helpers, shall dance and sing for thy delight each May morning. Now, this harkens back to times where in England, where on the 1st of May, you would have May Day, where it's kind of like a holiday where everyone comes, they celebrate spring. There is this dance along around the maypole, which is what you see here. And so it's kind of like, promising that if you come with me, there'll be a Christmas every day, right? Or at least through May, because the shepherds will dance and sing each May morning. So again, it's not just May Day, but you get to have May Day every day of May, which is probably also not very practical or not very much a reality, right? They're not going to be able to stop. You have one day for festival. You might not be able to stop every day of the month and have a festival. But this is what he's promising. And he's saying, so if this also appeals to you, then come with me and be my love. So he, in the last few minutes here, we have this idea that he's giving her lots of promises. But what happens when it's no longer summer or springtime? What happens when the cold comes? What happens when the belt falls apart, or you can't make the gown, or you dirty the embroidered kirtle? Can you sustain a bed of roses all the time? We can't have vacation or festival every day. So most of his promises are very empty or at least short-lived? And is this the kind of love that one is looking for? Something that is just for the moment. This is why this is a carpe diem poetry, a poem. Carpe diem meaning, remember, if you think back about Horace, seize the day, just seize the moment. It's just going to be for a moment, but it will be very fleeting. So we'll look at the next poem in this series is the response, the nymph's response to the shepherd, which Sir Walter Raleigh wrote, and it's quite scathing. I think it's going to be kind of fun.